Good afternoon. Welcome. It's Wayne's World. And look at what is at the bottom left. It's going to be recess time. I just added the ion at the end because this is going to be the time coming soon, probably before the end of the year, if all goes as planned with the Fed. We're going to go from a concern about inflation into the beginning of a recession. And as I look at that word, I love to play with words. I always feel good when I see recess. Recess was a fun time for me. So next year, 2023, and possibly the end of 2022, you're going to be able to enjoy some real estate investing like you enjoyed recess. If you just change the words at the end, I-O-N to I-O-W-N, during a recession, it's going to be recess and I own. Your goal should be to start thinking seriously about ramping up what I call the minimum of realtor investments every year, at least 2 properties. I would like to see you think seriously about at least 3 or more, depending on your guts gauge, how you feel about investing in different things and different ways to build wealth. But real estate is going to stand out like nothing you ever believed over the years. So let's take a look at some history of recession, take a look at what's happened during the 5 last big recessions, and come up with a very simple concept. Whoops, excuse me, that was my fault. And some of the basic concepts of what a recession is and how it will impact real estate. First of all, I am not an economist. I am a real estate investor. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a realtor. And my goal is to do for you what I would do for myself. Looking at how do I win during inflation, which we did. We'll review that. And now, how do we enjoy recess when the recession comes? And it's all based on I own. You've got to kick it up a notch if you're serious about taking advantage of things. You may have seen this before because I've used it previously. Money talks, wealth whispers. And again, I use money to buy assets that make more money. Others use money to buy things to make it look like they have money. The key to my secret, or my not secret, is the fact that I like to use other people's money. So I want to share some basic ideas of what you should be doing right now to start planning for that upcoming recession where wealth is going to be transferring, and hopefully to you. Obviously, those who don't understand history are bound to repeat it. It's said many different ways. This is Theodore Roosevelt's way of saying it. The more you know about the past, the better you are prepared for the future. The past is not an indicator of the future, but it's a pretty good idea of what could happen. The past is history. The future is a mystery. I have some ideas I feel I will share that I think will happen, and I'm basing my decisions on. But today is the gift. That's why it's called the present. So I'm living for today, but I've got a plan for tomorrow. Now, there's a recession ahead. Again, many people predict it will start before the end of the year. I'm going to suggest, and I'll mention this several times in our good hour today, that I'm perceiving that the next meeting of the Fed this week, the end of the week, you'll see basis points go up 75 points again. So in the last 2 meetings, last month and now this month, we're going to have 2 75-point increases. Then I look at this as being nothing more than 1/2 of a point in September, then 1/4 of a point for the last 2 meetings of the year, which means whatever happens today, we should be 1% more by the end of the year, and then it's going to trail off. That should do it. I was doing a seminar yesterday, and the lady said, "Are we in a recession?" I said, "No, we are not in a recession. The recession is ahead. We've still got inflation. You saw last month's data, we're at like 9.1%. These numbers are staggering because they're going back 40 plus years. And those who were around 40 years ago can share a lot of stories to other people who haven't. So find someone who was around in the early 80s when Jimmy Carter was president and start to see what evolved over the years. And we'll take a look at some of the big ones in a few moments. So in Wayne's world, I see the economy like a balloon. Let's pretend I gave one of you a balloon with instructions that said, blow it up as fast as you can. And the first person whose balloon pops is the winner. And someone else, I said, blow up your balloon very slow. We'll be taping this and watching how big your balloon gets. The larger your balloon gets before it pops, that's who the winner will be. Now, both of those people have different sets of instructions. One blowing fast to get it as big as possible, and one blowing slow so it stretches slowly and stretches bigger and bigger and bigger. Every single time, if that videotape is done, the person who blows fast busts the balloon at a much smaller size than the person who blew real slow. So for the past number of years, pushing probably close to 10, we have been blowing the balloon up slowly. It's been stretching, and that was good. We had inflation down. We had all kinds of good things happening with prices, and a bunch of stuff came into play, which was no fault of ours all the time, but our government does have some responsibility with government spending, which is another whole story. But the point is, now we've seen the economy skyrocketing, or the balloon is blowing up real fast. And every time the Fed meets, it seems to blow up faster and faster. So eventually the balloon is going to pop, but not before we see these massive changes in comparison to what we had over the past years implemented. But in the meantime, those who don't understand history are going back and saying, whoa, this is nothing compared to the 80s and the 90s. I mean, you people are just way overreacting. And they're probably right. You're looking at it from your perspective. This ain't that bad. Oh, it's not good. But it ain't that bad, especially if you spend some time, whether it's listening to my thoughts, looking at some other people's thoughts, or just finding some things out for yourself that says, I can prosper, whether it was inflation, and we'll cover the 5 components of that before we leave today, or now, what do I do in a recession in the real estate market? And why is it going to be such a good recess for me from this craziness that we've had and will have for the rest of the year? So patience is a virtue, but patience without persistence leads to paralysis. So you've got to have a persistent plan as you build your real estate investment strategy over the next few years. It looks to me like one of the key best return on investments in real estate investing could be, should be, and probably will be multifamily units. So if you're not following a guru who's looking at multifamily, I think you should start. I have some of the same philosophies in buying single family in small 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats, maybe 6 flats. As one of my best, I guess you'd say, colleagues in this business of investing, Grant Cardone, and his 10X program. He is heavily into multifamily, and I think he's going to see a growth like he may have not seen in years coming up next year during this recession. So we're going to talk about how do we accumulate some money, maybe not ours, but maybe other people's money. But we want the balloon. We want the balloon now to eventually deflate. So here's the rest of the story on that. We know why blowing up fast causes problems. We're seeing that right now. In the last year, we went from 3% in January to well over 6% today. We're seeing buying power being lost. We're seeing still a shortage of houses on the market because it blew up so fast. Yes, COVID. Yes, the war. Yes, economic policy to try to stimulate demand in the federal government all came together and created this balloon blowing up too fast. So now the balloon is big. You can't just pop it. And that's why a recession is going to be necessary. You can't just pop that balloon. So now the two people blew up their balloons. They didn't break, but they stopped. And the new instructions were, one person, let your balloon out real slow. Just hold the end and let the air come out real slow. And stand inside of this 10-foot circle. And as soon as all the air is out of the balloon, just drop it. And I guarantee you, it will fall inside that 10-foot circle, probably right in front of your feet. You controlled the change from a big balloon to a small balloon. The other person was given instructions, just see how fast you can let all the air out of your balloon. Just let it go. And so a fast balloon losing all its air is going all over the place. We don't know where it's going to end up. The odds are it will not end up anywhere in that 10-foot circle, no matter how many times you try. So now the analogy I'd like to, I guess, come to the conclusion with is you must watch and see, are we releasing the economy too soon and too fast, like the balloon that just goes everywhere? Or can we control the release of the inflation and get through the recession? And yes, we can. That's the way to do it. This should be a slow process. We don't see as many problems. See, we had a slow process in building the economy for years. And then all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, things went crazy. You know gas prices, you know food prices, you know shrinkflation, you know all the other issues with housing. We have a rental war in some cities, Chicago included, where people are doing multiple offers on rentals. How much more will they pay over what the building owner wants to charge? Rents are increasing at a rapid pace. So slow and control always is better than fast and uncontrolled. That's our economy. The balloon analogy reminds me of it many times. So what's happened? The last 40 years, 40 plus years. The big one started back in the Jimmy Carter era. Now, it actually began a process in housing back in 1977 with the Community Reinvestment Act, where the government felt everybody should own a home. Everybody should own a home. And that began the slow process that got us to where we were by the Great Recession in 2007, 2009. And some of you may remember all of these time frames. Others of you maybe remember the last two or maybe three. But again, looking back, reading about those, what was done, why it was done, how the Fed got involved, how there were a lot of foreclosures from lenders, starts to tell you why this recession will be totally different than any one of those five. Any one of those five. And we'll talk about that in a few moments. So, slow but sure, we found more and more ways to finance more and more people, to get in more and more homes at less and less of a concern about can they repay or what if there's a problem. The adjustable loans came out not that long ago. Home Savings of America was one of the first companies out of California to offer monthly adjustable loans. And boy, would that be a killer in the last year for people if they were offering those today. In fact, if anybody is on any kind of credit where it can change monthly, i.e. credit card debt, i.e. some unsecured credit for furniture or whatever, teasing by the 0% interest rate if you pay in 5 years. We'll talk about that. But the bottom line is that's where we were. And now all of that should bring us to a different world. I will suggest right now, from what I'm reading, from what I'm feeling, which is much more powerful than my reading brain, I'm feeling we will not even come close to duplicating the stuff we had in 2007, 8, and 9. I do not see the kind of bank foreclosures that we had in the past. I will see people losing some equity, and I will see people who have to sell because they bought last year or the year before and paid so much over list, eating that loss versus the banks that ate that loss and foreclosed back in the 2007 Great Recession that lasted for 2 years. To continue, home price changes during the last 5 recessions. This is critical. This came from CoreLogic, and I would recommend strongly that you look at CoreLogic. CoreLogic uses the Case-Shiller Index. Case and Shiller have been recognized as very good predictors of success. I use CoreLogic. I use Pulsenomics as my 2 resources to gather my information. I feel they both bring me a lot of what I can use and build on. And then I'll bring in some other ancillary things, Bloomberg, other places that I respect, Forbes, with some of their analysis. But my main 2 places I learn from on a regular basis are CoreLogic and the Case-Shiller Index and Pulsenomics. In fact, I use Pulsenomics a lot to predict my long-term rent increases, because sometimes I give people 3, 4, 5-year leases, and I adjust them, graduate them. But look at what happened. See, 2008 or 2007, 2009 was when we really, really lost value. Prices went down because of all the foreclosures. The Fed started, or the government, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, Freddie Mac, started this downward trend of reducing prices. And some poor neighbor, maybe you, because your neighbor down the street was foreclosed on, was underwater, and they unloaded the house for a cheap price. That impacted all the market analysis in your neighborhood. Some people got hurt real bad because they did nothing wrong. They just were next to somebody or in a market area where there were a lot of foreclosures and banks were unloading property left and right. I did a seminar yesterday, and it reminded me how much time I spent at the 5-star conferences back then. And the 5-star conference, if you're looking for buying property and foreclosures, wholesalers, etc., the 5-star conference is such a wonderful place to meet, learn, and gather information. I recommend it highly. It's coming up, I think, in the next month. But more importantly, we're looking at only 2 of the times, really only 1 that impacted us badly, which is the one you probably see the most because it's most recent. So please go back and look at the other 4, because for all practical purposes, averaging those 4 out, even with that small loss in the 1990 recession, we don't have a problem with assuming we are going to see some pretty good growth in real estate prices, and you can make some powerful profits by real estate investing. Again, if I had to pick the number 1 best one right now, which I don't do a lot of, multifamily big units, possibly a syndication with somebody, and I may look at that for the first time. At this stage of the game, I may give a shot at getting involved in some multifamily investing. My biggest properties are 18-unit buildings, 6, 6, and 6, all latched together, and that's for tax purposes in Chicago. So there's a lot here. We saw the 5 recessions. Now we see the impact of home price changes in the last 5 recessions. And the beauty not only of the home price changes that will grow in the next recession, 2023, is rents are skyrocketing in most markets. It's rare not to see huge lease renewals. It's rare not to see the capitalization rates look tremendous. So we got a lot, what I call good news as we get ready for recess. Recess I own. RECESSIOWN. You got to own during a recession. And the reason you got to want to own is whether it's inflation or recession, as I've said many times, either one of those time cycles, wealth transfers from one group of people to another group of people. You must learn to be the transferee instead of the transferor. So I gave you 5 strategies several weeks ago on how to win inflation with Wayne. I'll remind you of those because there's still time to capitalize on those, because with the Fed still raising rates, with prices still climbing, we're going to see an opportunity to make sure you don't lose money. It's not loseflation, it's winflation. You want wealth to transfer to you. So, got to do a little work here. Hold on, kids. Little malfunction, patience is a virtue. Okay, back on track, maybe. So, recession, debt, loss, buy, sell, gain, invest. And right inside, you can't probably see the numbers there, but I overlaid that for one reason. I want you to take a close look at that when I put it up on the next screen, because I have always been under the impression that credit is a power tool in a consumer workshop. So here we are. We talked about balance transfers. I'm going to rephrase those again. This is the time, I feel, as a consumer, as a small investor, not a syndicator, to accumulate as many credit cards as you can, offering 0% balance transfers. We still have banks offering up to 21 months at 0% with a 3% fee. That means $10,000 is going to cost you $300 to control for nearly 2 years. That's about 50 cents a day. Because when the recession hits, if you have cash or a way to get cash liquid, whether it's a HELOC you use from your investment property, or if you're a gambling person and your partner is okay with using the equity in your home, you're going to need cash to buy things. Because when there's a recession, wealth is transferring. There'll be a lot of stuff for sale, not just real estate. There's going to be cars. There's going to be appliances. There's going to be furniture. There's going to be all kinds of things. If you have cash, you'll negotiate a tremendous deal. So we're going to look at the fact that if I can start building that, but more importantly, in Wayne's world, it's always been and always will be. Borrow as much as you can, pay it off as fast as you can. It's not the interest rate, my friends. It's the balance. And then use that money and continually do more things. That's why the mindset of leverage is so powerful in real estate investing. Please remember, real estate is not the best investment. It's the ideal investment. We got to make sure we leave here reminding you what each letter in the word ideal means. So if you have credit card debt and you have a 20% card, and some are higher and some are around 16 to 18, but at 20%, if you just went and got one of those 21-month zero balance transfers and paid $300 to pay off the $10,000 loan, you'll save $2,000. Borrow as much as you can, pay it off as fast as you can. And you'll have very, very minimal payments each month at 0%. And then something else will pop up. But don't overlook right now in inflation getting rid of debt, especially debt that is based on regular interest rate changes as a result of the Fed increases, the unsecured debt. Credit card's the killer. Credit card's the killer. It's a power tool and consumer workshop. Use it wisely, tremendous. Use it poorly, you're injured or even died. So what are the best balance transfer credit cards in July 2022? Right now, the longest I see is 21 months. But it's 12, 15, 18. That's even at 12 months to be able to control for a fraction of the price is still not bad. Even at 3% on $10,000. That's less than $1 a day for 1 year to get rid of high debt or start to accumulate some money to go through old debt. See, I would take balance transfers and I would pay that off and pay that off and pay that off and have that money set aside so I could use it later for some investing. This is the time that's going to make some sense. Remember, 30-year fixed back at the beginning of the year around 3%, and now we're pushing 5.29, in some cases 6. That's changed just in 6 months. And obviously, it may not have much of a change following for the rest of the year. And so most lenders, most people say we're probably going to stay around this. A few people think it might jump up a little bit, but even at 7%, it is minimal, especially if you make up the difference fast by paying it down. And a 0% credit card can help you pay it down to an effective rate that's much lower than the 7 or 6 or even 5%. Because you're using 0% money for 18 months, 15 months, 21 months. In 21 months, whatever recession we have will be well over. If you look back today, July 2022, and go 21 months into the future, make a note of today's information. Make a note of the Fed's Thursday, Friday, Fed increase meetings. And then look at it in 21 months. And you've had use of somebody else's money for 21 months at the cost of 50 cents a day for every $10,000 you can get in credit. And use that, in my case, to buy real estate investments. Now, core inflation is the one that you hear about the most. So while we're in this mess, we got to look at this and realize that it doesn't include energy and food products. So in the real world, people are using more gasoline and spending more money on food, whether it's shrinkflation, or whether it's just higher prices for the same amount. And so obviously, you've got to be very careful about getting into the headline inflation, the core inflation. And so we talked a while back, I think it was 2 or 3 sessions ago, when we first started talking about inflation, that these are the basic indexes that are happening. And every one of you looking at those 8 major groups that are in the index are affected more by others. If you don't buy a lot of clothes, apparel prices mean nothing to you. If you don't travel a lot or drive a lot, transportation doesn't mean much. Medical care, if you're on some kind of a great health insurance plan or you just don't need medical services, but you do have food and beverages, you do have housing, and you probably have other things you have to pay for, whether it's utility rates and other processes. So you got to almost put this together in your own way in what we called a while back your personal consumer price index. So again, right now I'm seeing the best credit card. This is U.S. News and World Report. It's a good source. Bankrate is a good source. There's a lot of great sources to find the best cards for balance transfers. And this is the longest I have seen. 47 cents a day to control $10,000. $20,000, which could be a great down payment on some income property in some markets, or a good start, would be less than $1 a day. About 95 cents. How can you say no to that and start buying at least 2 income properties the rest of this year, and maybe increasing it to 3 in 2023 or more? This is the time. We're getting ready for recess, and recess is always an exciting time in school kids' lives. Some people think recess was the best course they ever took at school. So peek carefully, choose carefully, and realize the potential of using other people's money at pretty much no cost to you. Now, just a reminder, we're seeing a lot of demand pull inflation. People are paying way overpriced for cars, for tickets. I saw some tremendous increases in ticket prices to go to nice concerts. I've been looking at a couple of concerts now that we're seeing more live presentations and looking at some of the ticket prices. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Whether it's Jimmy Buffett, whether it's Cher, whether it's some band you like or some singer you like, the ticket prices are unbelievable. We're talking hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for a seat, for a decent seat. A lot of things have gone up. Cost push inflation is killing us because we're seeing the cost of transportation, farm goods, transportation of product. Truckers have to be incentivized. Truckers are paying much more for fuel. Diesel prices are staggering, which is hurting the farmer and the long-haul truck driver. And then we have basic concept of what I call wage push inflation. As prices go up, people want more money, so somebody gives them more money, but they're not more productive, and pretty soon we have rising prices in what I call wage push inflation. So with that said, we can take a peek at the key takeaways. This is inflation as we see it. Take a moment. You've seen something like this previously. You've been with me for a long time. And obviously some companies will reap the rewards if they can charge more. I'm seeing a lot of people that do labor for work in construction demanding much higher prices because they are busy. I asked a guy about putting some carpeting into one of my buildings. I've got some stairways I want to recarpet. He can't do them till September. Now, I'm sure if I would have said, hey, if I give you an extra 20%, could you get them done this month? I don't need them. That's probably true of anything in life, whether we're in an inflationary market or not. You will pay more for something when you don't have a lot of time left to make a decision. Last minute purchases tend to cost a lot. You wait till winter time to buy a battery in the middle of winter when it's 20 below, there's no sales on batteries. If you wait to put an air conditioner in until it's 105 degrees, there's no sale on air conditioners. So common sense says you have to realize the power of the key takeaways. So let's switch gears and look at the last half of the day, reminding you of the balloon. Blowing it up too fast, too quick, will expand and inflate the economy, and it pops. And that's what we're looking at right now. The cost of inflation, we've been through this. The key one is on the right side about the 3 o'clock position. Your real value of savings is diminishing. Holding on to money for the last year, for the next few months, for the rest of this year, and not earning anything on it. I'm seeing CD rates pop up for 2.65% if you want to give it to them for 19 months. But there's loads of banks offering some short-term rates. I just took a chunk of money and moved over to Citibank. I have never had an account at Citibank in my life. But to take a balance transfer for $50,000 and keep it there for 90 days and get $700 bonus plus interest, unbelievable. It's like, why should I say no? I'll get the money at 0%. I'll pay the 3%. And I can use that. Plus, in the meantime, while I'm waiting for about 60 more days, I'm earning $700. Now, that's small-time peanuts to some big investors. I understand that. But I think it's not how much you make. It's how much you keep. So why would I not use somebody else's money to earn $700? Or if I had the money, why would I not go into that account for the 90 days at no cost? And then we're going to see the economic cycle that showed a lot of these prices. This was back in February. And these haven't changed a lot, although gasoline is starting to decline in some marketplaces. We're seeing some interesting numbers. But a lot of utilities are sending out new notices because utilities are competitive. And some of those kilowatt hours look pretty scary to me. But more importantly, we're here today to talk about the recession. So here, just as we put up some facts about inflation, these are some facts about recession. And this is why in Wayne's world, I'm saying we are not in a recession right now. We're not far, but we're kind of far away from a recession because we still, it looks like, have at least, if I calculate right, before the end of the year, another 1.75% increase in the Fed funds rate. 75 basis points this week, and then a 50 basis points in September, and then 25 basis points the last two meetings of the Fed this year. That's my prediction. You're welcome to come back in January and see if in Wayne's world were I right or did I miss the boat. So we got 7 major areas. Real gross domestic product. Everything falls. Unemployment rises. This is where it's always an indicator, kind of a benchmark to see where inflation will taper off. There's something called the Phillips curve in economics. It's sometimes called the inflation-unemployment trade-off. If you want low inflation, you have to have high unemployment. So here we are, recession. We're going to raise the employment rate and inflation will come down. Right now, we have, I think, about 3% of the people out of work. So 97% of the people are working, 3% are not. But we have high inflation, 9%. Now, if we can get that down to 6, 5, 4%, we might see 7, 8, 9% unemployment. The inflation-unemployment trade-off is always a little way to look at what looks like is happening in the future. Are people hiring or are people laying off? In a recession, unemployment will rise. That's the inflation-unemployment trade-off. Inflation will fall, lower demand. Lower demand, I don't need as many workers. Now, there's some factors we can't control with COVID and with the war, and hopefully not too much crazy government spending. But there's number 4, government debt. Government tends to borrow because of some things that are in the system they can't control. And unfortunately, we're in what's called an expansionary fiscal policy. We have an era where it now looks like people want to spend money as a way they think will get us out of inflation. Again, my mindset always has looked at it differently. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. I do not mind giving anybody any wage they want if they can produce enough to justify that wage. But if you give people more money for doing no more work, we have too many dollars chasing too few goods. And that's been our problem. Asset prices. So we'll see stocks change. I don't follow stocks that much, but if you're a stock person, you'll see assets like stocks coming down as housing prices will adjust. They have to. It's supply demand. I mean, this is so basic. It's just not easy to figure out and do because we don't know when, how long, or what other things about it. And then interest rates. Again, they'll have to start cutting interest rates to stimulate economic growth. They'll have to do one or more of 3 things. They'll either have to buy securities in the marketplace to give people some money to spend, or they will change the discount rate and make it cheaper for banks to borrow money to people, and they will change the required reserve ratio, how much money banks have to keep in reserve they can't lend out. That's what you're going to see the signs. Rising interest rates are very simply, they've raised the discount rate. It costs the banks more to borrow money, which means they pass it on to you, or they change the required reserve ratio. Banks have to hold 30% instead of 20%, or they go out there and they affect the impact of the Federal Open Market Committee's buying and selling securities. That's all the Fed can do, 3 things. And then lastly, investment. Firms will cut back on investment to try to survive the recession. And so as you watch some of the investment changes, you'll see how that starts to evolve. So these are the major, as I see it, 7 things to watch for. And as they start to devolve, you'll see we're getting closer and closer and closer to that recession. Now, looking at that, very simply, will recession affect the housing market? I put a lot up there. I identified about 6 or 7, 8 key components. Annual appreciation of home prices. Home prices will appreciate, on the average, well over 15% this year. We're still going to see some appreciation. And that'll help some people who did pay more than list in multiple offers. It's going to impact, again, a person's buying power, because if prices are rising and interest rates are rising, that means much, much, much less money I can borrow at the same monthly payment. Remember, roughly for every 1% interest rates go up, a person loses 11% of their mortgage buying power. A $400,000 loan at 5% for the same dollar amount will only borrow about $360,000 if it goes up 1%. And that's the impact of that problem. The timeline of the housing supply. We are not building houses. Oh, in some markets we are. In some markets we are. And so why is it so low? We started building a lot in the 90s. ADA came into effect. We had a record number of homes built. And then for the last chunk of time, well over the last decade, very few new houses, very few new developments, very few major big developments. You probably track housing starts in your area. That's a powerful tool. We've been playing catch up. I think someone said we're 4 million housing units short from where she should be by now, based on projected growth over the years. Because every year we built less and less and less and less since the early 90s. It's piled up to be, we're short 4 million homes. And again, in some markets, population's growing at a rate that home building can't keep up with. Look at South Dakota, Florida, California. People are moving to because of low taxes, no taxes, different climates, etc. And we start to see that, wow, those places can't keep up with construction. Then we have construction prices. Hard to catch up with supply when it costs so much more to build the same house. But once again, a hard asset like lumber, if there was some company that took an option or bought a bunch of lumber and stored it, they probably have lumber that they purchased at sometimes half of what they have to pay for it now. Because hard assets are an inflation hedge. Loan volume. We had a lot of loans that went out at ridiculously crazy rates with no real verification of value back in 2007, 2009. For people that had low credit scores. I was talking last night at the program I did, and happened to have a loan officer that were talking about the NINAs, the no income, no asset verification loans that are starting to pop up again. And I remember I was doing a seminar, and a person in the audience was a loan officer and wanted to share their new loan program called the Ninja. This is why we had a problem with mortgage debt and people having bad problems with foreclosures. The Ninja, N-I-N-G-A, no income, no job, no asset verification. If you had a job, you couldn't get that loan. No income, no asset, no job. Ninja. Now we see people with high credit scores that are having a tough time because they have to pay more. And we've got lenders still going back to low credit scores. I have a lender that I use in this area that will do a credit of 560 FICO score and get people a loan. Yes, they will pay a little higher interest rate, but they can refinance once they get in. And again, homeowner equity has grown at a rapid pace. And this is why, as we looked at that chart of the 5 recessions, we will not see what happened in 2079. We're not going to lose all that value. There's not going to be all these bank foreclosures. If people have problems, they'll be eating that themselves. I don't think the lenders are that nearly as worried as they were back in 2007, 2009. Because we have more equity. And a lot of people paid a lot of out-of-pocket money, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 over list. So obviously they've got some equity because their loan is low. They may lose if something goes wrong, but it's their money. It's not the bank's money. It's not the lender's money. And then here we are. As a real estate investor, as a person in Wayne's World that wants you to join me as a Wayniac, rents continue to skyrocket. We're seeing more and more lenders that are realizing investors want to buy up properties and rent them out. Even though prices are rising, the numbers still work because the rents are so high. Now, I can't say that's good in every market. I only know my market in the Chicagoland area is where most of my activity is. But I see it and hear about it from places I go to train. Austin, 40% price increase in appreciation last year, 2022. So, final thought, will a recession affect home prices? No. In Wayne's World, the answer is no. Will it affect home sales? Yeah. In some markets, more than others. But hopefully through reading what I just put up here, watching my video again that we're doing today, you might be able to understand the difference. History shows that appreciation will continue to be steady, but it will have an effect on home sales. We're talking about small impacts. We're going from an A+ investment world maybe to an A- investment world. Nothing drastic. I feel the gloom and doom and all the articles that are negative are just putting people in a negative perspective they don't need to be. The interest rates are not nearly as impactful as they could be. Yes, it's hurting some people. Yes, but it will solve itself because inflation is here and going up. Pretty soon inflation will come down, and pretty soon we will have recession, and recession will bring prices down. And this is the opportunity. I own during a recession. Recess, I own. I-O-N. Don't lose that thought, please. Remember, we looked at this a while back. The key things right now are to balance out your consumption, your investing, how to pay less taxes, how to start putting money away in a safe account, and then have the knowledge of watching the market. Look at what's happening with prices. Look at what's happening with the Fed. Look at what's happening with all these other tools we've talked about. And you're going to find that there's a lot of potential for you to do very well in the marketplace. But you see, if you don't understand what happened in the past, you won't know what to do in the future. So I gave you some tips, some ideas, some suggestions. I don't see a huge problem. I see a tremendous opportunity. Recession will bring people into a point where they will have to transfer wealth. Hopefully none of you on this call today or any of your friends or family will have to transfer wealth. But you need to be aware of the opportunities of receiving the transferred wealth, and that's where cash is going to come in. Whether it's money you're storing right now by using 0% balance transfers or paying off debt and putting the difference away, whatever it is, to have the cash, you're going to be able to do a lot of good negotiating, and not just in real estate, but in many other areas also. So I got a couple more slides I want to browse through that we did already, but I want to get into some other things. One last thing that still looks like it's paying a pretty good rate of return that will help you in your personal inflation rate is the TIPS, the Treasury Indexed Securities. And watching your personal consumer price index will make a difference. So, TIPS are Treasury Inflated Protected Securities. TIPS. The numbers are very, very, very strong. So maybe right now the best place to put some money in is a tip for short term. Some people tell me that they're getting close to 8% on some tips. So I would not look at that for the long term. Just like I wouldn't take a 2-year CD out at 2.65%. I'd like to look at a 30-day CD or a 2-month CD or 1-month CD. But tips are not a bad place. They're a good hedge against inflation. And while we are in inflation, remember the rule of 72s, the rule of 114s, the rule of 144. We are at 9% inflation. That means if this continued, and boy, I sure hope it doesn't, but if it does, I'll be fine. But some other people will be hurt a lot. 9 into 72 is 8. That means in 8 years, your investments would double. And if you leverage, instead of taking $100,000 and putting it down on a $500,000 property, why not take $50,000 and buy 2 homes with a $450,000 mortgage? Because they will go up the same. Now, if it continues at 9, that means in 8 years, 2030, your investment would have doubled and you leveraged it because you put very little money down. And that's true of anything. Rule of 114 just gets you there faster. Money triples by taking the interest rate or the price index rate dividing by 114. And to want to see it quadruple, the rule of 144s. Rule of 72s is fine. You can extrapolate. Very simple. Interest rates go down to 6%. 6 into 2 is 12. Take 12 years to get your money back. But you see, if you're leveraging with real estate, it's not all your money. And those people have a home paid for. If things double in 8 years, they'll get the same price as somebody who borrowed 100% and paid off very little in the last 8 years. Because inflation doesn't look at whether you owe a lot or don't owe a lot. The price goes up no matter what. So use this call today, use this time today as a way to realize, how do I finish the year strong with good inflation tactics? And then how am I preparing myself so I can blast past 2022 and get into 2023 with recessionary strategies? And that's what my goal was today, to help you realize we're still in inflation. We're not going to have recession for a while. I think the Fed will pump up rates about 1.75% total by the end of the year. That's my projection, and that's all it is. But I'm building my mindset on those kind of things happening. So when I look at 2023, I'm going to be ready, set, and go. We talked about different kinds of income. Just a reflection. I'm of the opinion that you're here to get passive income. Your passive income should be earning more than your earned income every day. Every year you're alive, well, and prospering, you should have more passive income compared to your earned income. And at some point, hopefully, the sooner the better, the longer you can enjoy it, all passive income, very little earned income. Investments, real estate, monthly income from rent, whatever it might be. And real estate is one of the best forms of passive income. I said I'd leave you to remind you what the 5 words are in the word ideal, and that's what I'm going to do. Real estate is not the best investment. It's the ideal investment. Why? Because it gives you a monthly income. Checks come in every month. D is for depreciation. We have that ability to write off the building value of a residential property over 27 and a half years. Every $1 million worth of real estate building value, you write off $36,000 artificial expense against your income. $3 million worth of real estate value, $108,000 of income you worked for can be tax-free. The E is for equity buildup. The beauty of borrowing a lot on an investment property and covering your costs is that your tenants are buying you that income property. I I am blessed to have tenants who have bought me houses. They actually stayed there long enough. The loan was based on 15 years. After 15 years, they paid all the rent, which paid off all the loan. I've got tax benefits, and I own the house. Or I own a lot of it if it took me longer. Then the appreciation. And this is what we're going to see. Not as big as we thought we would, but in 2023, there's going to be some decent appreciation. We got a lot of appreciation this year. But it's going to come down at least half of what it was. At least half. And then the L is leverage. The beauty of being in real estate is one of the few investments where I don't have to pay for it all. In fact, I can pay for none of it sometimes, between a first and a second. Or if I'm a veteran, I can buy up to a 4 flat with no money down. I can do purchase money mortgages. I can use a home equity line of credit for the down payment. Do the numbers. That's all I ask. So we're leaving Wayne's World today, looking at a number of things related to continually understanding the concept of inflation, continually understanding the concept of recession, and things are looking up because we started with the day saying it's recess with an ion at the end. Recession. Recession is going to be a great way for you to build your real estate empire in a better way than you ever thought you could a year ago in the process. So with that said, I am saying goodbye. Have an enjoyable weekend, and feel free to practice what I've preached, because I feel it's critical that you, by your nature, do something versus doing nothing, because the sooner you invest, the longer you